Hello and welcome to the Glasgow 850 show. My name is Jessica Elliott, and on this show today we are going to be talking all about the climate emergency, COP26 and all things green Glasgow. Today I have a very special guest. To my right I have Dr. Stephen Hendry. Welcome to the show. Hello, how are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, it's absolutely lovely to have you. So could you tell us a bit more about what it is that you do?
Yeah, so I am the Programme Manager for Socioeconomic Inclusion at the Royal Society of Chemistry. But before that role, I worked in the education team and I was an education coordinator. As part of that role, it was working with primary and secondary teachers to help inspire them to deliver a high-quality chemistry education. And that is where my work around COP26 came in, and the work that we did to support primary and secondary teachers during that period.
And you touched on it a bit there about, supporting primary and secondary schools and basically supporting the youth. Why do you think that it is so vital to educate young people on these issues like climate change?
So ultimately, we know that young people are engaged and inspired by these types of activities, climate emergency, coming up with a cure for cancer, etc. And they're driven by cause. That is the main motivation that they are seeking.
And if I could just get your thoughts on, there's crucial steps that we have to take to educate the youth. What are some of the crucial steps, in your opinion, that we have to take?
So I think one of the key things is the misinformation that's being spread, and being able to equip young people with the knowledge and the skills to be able to apply that to the information that they're taking on so that they can make informed decisions and choices around climate emergency and the impact that it's having. And I think as part of that, we need to have these open discussions, and we need to not shy away from the impact that it's having.
And let's touch on Glasgow, the city as a whole, for a second. What do you think that the city could do better in terms of its environmental impact?
So we've seen a lot of positive steps. There's sort of work towards net zero, increase in public transport across Glasgow, the regeneration of urban spaces, creating the green spaces. But I think there's still a lot of work still to be done. So building on that momentum and having that sustained improvement over time. And I think we need to keep working towards that net zero. We need to keep understanding the issues that it is having on our community, both locally and globally.
And you touched on some of the positives there. What are, the kind of highlights for you about the positives that Glasgow have done in this regard?
The highlights, so essentially the green space initiatives is really taken up, where they've been regenerating the urban spaces. We've also saw the ULEZ zone that's been brought in to reduce air pollution, which is another contributing factor to climate change. And again, just the sort of openness and building those links with community to make sure that everyone is engaged and involved with the climate emergency.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Doctor. So the HNC students have made a few videos to celebrate Glasgow's 850th birthday. Here is one of them now.
Welcome to Glasgow 850. Glasgow is the biggest city in Scotland with a population of over 600,000. It is an eco-conscious, forward-looking city. Across the city, there are over 90 quiet green spaces to unwind. The Hidden Gardens, a serene space full of diverse plants and flowers on the south side of Glasgow. Glasgow is a great city and a leading example of superb eco-management and volunteering. We hope you will come and visit us someday. Happy birthday, Glasgow.
That video was a great example of just some of the amazing things about Glasgow and our efforts to be more environmentally friendly. So now let me come back to you. As you know, COP26 was held in Glasgow. So I just wanted to touch a bit on that. Do you think that COP26 was a success?
I think there's a bit of both. There's the positives and negatives that we can take away from COP26. So initially we have that commitment to reducing methane, reducing deforestation. We had a coming together from countries all over the world and a commitment to working towards net zero and working towards that 1.5 degrees Celsius climate limitation. But I think, speaking now sort of constructively and the potential negatives that have arisen from that is that there wasn't robust mechanisms put in place to actually enforce that implementation. And I think a lot of scientists, public policy makers were a little bit disappointed that it didn't go far enough. And I think that's one of the areas, it's a little bit of a grey area that they've got.
And we spoke a bit earlier about, educating the youth on climate change. And around the time of COP26, you recorded a climate change workshop for teachers to use in the classrooms. Could you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I targeted primary teachers. So working in the Royal Society of Chemistry, we know the importance of embedding science capital at the ages of 7 and 11. These are key stages for their career trajectories and if they want to go into STEM or science subjects. We know the importance of science and STEM to helping to solve some of these issues around climate emergency, and we need all of the voices in the room. So we need to make sure that we've got a diverse workforce that are working together and working with one voice. So we targeted primary teachers who had commented that they felt a little bit unprepared in terms of teaching climate change and bringing it into the curriculum. So the workshop was linked to the Scottish curriculum, which meant that primary teachers could use the resources, the practicals, and embed it straight into their teaching straight away. We had 175 teachers attend. This number would have been a lot higher, but unfortunately COVID pandemic came in and it sort of stopped it. But the responses that we had from those teachers that did attend, 97% as a result of attending felt that they were more confident in delivering the climate change, the climate emergency, and bringing that in and having these conversations within the classroom. And I think that's what's really key about all of this, that we have to have these conversations, we have to be having it at an early age. And even if these young people aren't going into science STEM subjects, it's important that they understand it and they've got that citizenship, that they're able to make those decisions when they're maybe voting or when they're maybe buying a car or buying a house and thinking about those sort of the impact that they are having and how they can reduce their contribution.
And yeah, obviously it's really important to get the newer generation talking. Do you think that COP26 was discussed enough in schools?
I think one of the difficulties when speaking about climate change and the climate emergency is that it's seen as a global issue, and therefore that sort of diffusion of responsibility, whereas it doesn't fall on individuals to take action, and they feel helpless, they feel that they don't have any power to make those changes, and they look to places like India and China, which we know are sort of high polluters, and having those sort of discussions around the policy legislation that's coming in place. But there is a collective silence around climate change. We are seeing across Europe, we are seeing in our local environment across Glasgow, extreme and diverse weather changes almost happening on a yearly basis. And we are not associating that with climate. And we are just assuming that this will carry on, this is a natural thing. And we have to have those conversations about the responsibility that we have. All of the research points towards these conversations having the biggest impact on people's behaviour, and in particular, conversations with your peer group, with your family, with your friends. And I think that is so important, that we are having those questions and we are not seeing climate as something that's 30, 40 years in the future. It's something that we need to be acting on now. And again, COP26 highlighted some of that urgency that we have to do it, and we have to make sure that we've got those diverse voices as well, that everyone feels involved.
Yeah, no, definitely. It just highlights it. So now we have another video made by the HNC students about the many green spaces around Glasgow.
Welcome to Glasgow, a city in rich history and vibrant green spaces. Celebrating 850 years of life and beauty. In the heart of the city lies the Botanic Gardens, an oasis where nature flourishes amidst the urban landscape. Explore Pollock Park, where vast green spaces and iconic Highland cows tell a story of harmony between history and nature. Victoria Park invites you to bask in its seasonal beauty. 850 years of Glasgow, a city that grows hand in hand with nature, where every park offers a piece of the heart. Join us in celebrating our green spaces.
Well, that was a nice showcase of just some of the beautiful green spaces around the city. And so let me come to you, Doctor. Do you have a favourite park or nature spot around Glasgow?
Yeah, so I live in Paisley, and one of my favourite spots is the Glen of Braes. So I've got a dog, and we go there walking a dog, and it's the views that you get across Glasgow, and it's also that connection with nature as well. It's so important for your well-being and your mental health. So a lot of the time, if I'm maybe getting a little bit stressed at work, the first thing I'll do is I'll go for a walk, and you know, that 10-20 minute walk has a massive impact on my well-being, and it also helps me focus on what's important and how to structure my work, and almost sometimes come back with the answers that I had for my problems.
Exactly, yeah, these spaces can be so important. So do you think that the city should put a bigger focus on, increasing the amount of green spaces that we have?
Yeah, so, as I touched on in the previous question there, it has a massive impact on mental health and well-being when we see green spaces, when we're connected to nature. And I think, it should be spread out across the whole of Glasgow, even the whole of Scotland. And we should protect these green spaces as well. So when we're thinking about pollution and when we're thinking about the negative impacts that that's having on the environment, we need to do a lot more to support and secure these spaces. I think it's also important to think about the areas that don't have green spaces and those areas of Glasgow that are maybe living in poverty or marginalised groups that is just houses after houses. And it's so important for them that we have green spaces for everyone and not just in the key locations like Glasgow Green or Kelvin Grove in the West End.
Yeah, definitely. And just finally, since we are here to celebrate Glasgow's 850th birthday, what are some of your favourite things about Glasgow as a whole?
I know it's going to sound a little bit corny, but I think it goes back to the people make Glasgow. It's only once you leave Glasgow that you realise how unique and how special a place Glasgow is, and that is all down to the people and, as you say, the Glasgow banter or the patter that we have. And I think there's an openness to accept everyone. I don't think anyone puts themselves up on a pedestal. I think everyone's grounded and everyone knows where they've came from, and they grow together, not just individually as well. And I think if you look at recent protests with sort of right-wing protests where they were talking about coming up to Glasgow, everywhere else was quite popular, but in Glasgow that was something that was put out. There was anti-protest going. We've got things like that throughout the history, like Nelson Mandela Square, and just that sort of social responsibility and inclusion that we have as a community, I think.
No, and like you say, people truly do make Glasgow. Thank you very much for that insight. So thank you for joining me here today to discuss these important topics and for joining us to celebrate Glasgow's 850th anniversary. Here is one final video created by our HNC students. And from all of us, happy birthday, Glasgow.